Hello.
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 Nik. Adrian, hello.
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 Welcome to our live viewers. Today we have TDD with React with Nik Sumeiko with us. Nik is possibly one of my most prominent mentors on front-end testing because I'm more of a back-end fanatic, and it's very hard to get me to do anything serious on the front end. So I'm really happy that you're here with us. I mean, Adrian has been trying to teach me PWAs and Tailwind lately, but it's time to get
without any success so far. But we are on it.
We're on it. If anything, you've shown me the dark side of I like hating Tailwind.
Now you don't hate it anymore, right?
Not as much. I mean, I have found the reasons to love it, even though the hate might still be there sometimes. Nik, hello.
Thank you very much for approaching me with this. I'm actually always want to share something with people here on LinkedIn, some educational material, and today is a great opportunity for this.
What can the audience expect today from this session? So what will you do both in particular about this topic?
We will try to live code a bite-sized React application using test-driven development and crafting it using clean architecture. And my goal today is to make sure that people understand that that's not complicated. TDD or clean architecture or both are not complicated in React. And I will try to prove this today.
We have a lot of guests today. Hello from Croatia, Tunisia. We have Willy. I saw Nihat there. Lots of new faces. Also, some of my former mentees. It's lovely to see you. Brazil. Okay, we're going international. A lot of German fans, and Anjana, one of our regulars. And I have to say, we broke a record.
By 10 times.
We broke our record by 10 times. We have almost 250 people live on LinkedIn and about 10 people on the other platforms. So this is a first for us. So Nick, I'm sorry. I told you we'd have at least 50 people here. So I broke my promise by about 5x. So I'm known to be bad at estimations. So I have to apologize in advance.
Yeah. We are all software developers. We all don't know how to estimate things. Or we believe that we can do that.
So we are celebrating TDD February here on the Thursday tracks of our tech journey. And our focus has been primarily so far to look into the basics, the fundamentals, the modern tools, a lot of which you're already using, which I'm super happy about because I already saw you in the prep and on some of your other podcasts, Nick, where you are using the latest tools like vtest and using the more component-oriented testing plugins for things like Cypress, etc. Then on the last episode, we looked into the test desiderata qualities defined by Kent Beck, about what makes good tests and what are the sort of tests, what are the sort of trade-offs that we can do in our tests and how we design our tests, how we make some choices on, do we want it to be a little bit faster? Do you want it to be a bit more precise? Do you want it to be more coupled, more cohesive, more isolated? Or do we want it to give us sort of like a production level guarantee that things work? So I will be using a lot of that kind of terminology from the test desiderata. While you code, you have a very well prepared presentation from what I can tell, and I will be sort of shadowing you. You are coding alone and you're commenting, and I'll be shadowing you, sort of interrupting you in bits and pieces where it might seem interesting. But so far,
I will help with the comments and try to get the audience connected with you both while you're doing that. So feel free to ask questions as long as the questions are related and good questions. So probably there are only good questions today. We will present them, and as soon as I display them, I would ask you both to go over them, because I think that if we're going to make breaks, we will
be messy.
Exactly, it will be a little bit complicated to do that, but we try to do that. So as soon as you see a question, try to do it as fast as possible. So don't spend 10 minutes for a question. Just do it, answer the question in 1 or 2 sentences, and then go ahead. This is the pace I would suggest for today would be the best. Yeah.
Okay. So far, we have a lot of greetings. A lot of love.
Maybe from my side to say, I will be doing live coding in front of you. And there will be, of course, VTF moments, So just if you have a clue, and write in a comment to help me out to move on further. Maybe I'm stuck somewhere. But that's a normal process that we all experience at work. Yeah.
So it is React. It is TypeScript React, correct? It is TypeScript React. And Nick, just before the show went live, if you're on LinkedIn, Nick shared the link to the repository where he will be working off as a starting point. Now, we won't do live pull request and push, but if you do want to follow along and spin it up in your editor, the link is there. Go check it out real quick. Check it out. Check the repo out. And if you want, do a quick pnpm or your favorite packager npm bun install, and you can follow along. But I think Nick will be going at his own pace, and it is his repo, and this is well rehearsed. So don't feel bad for not being able to keep up. If you do have any questions where you might not be able to keep up for like structural or architectural reasons, please ask in chat. Keep in mind we have about a 60-second to a 2-minute delay until you see the answer. So we see your response immediately, but there's a little bit of delay on you getting the answer. So you might not be able to comment on what Nik's doing line for line, but you might be able to sort of ask questions that jog us around on the more architectural aspect.
Nihat Nihat is asking what you are showing today with React can also be used with Angular, question mark. Nik.
Totally. Not only used, I think Angular already has it in place.
Great.
Like by default, let's say.
You want to mention, I'm not going to lead your presentation. You have a presentation. You're well rehearsed. Shall we start?
Absolutely.
Okay, I will put your, so Adrian, Nik cannot control the stage. So he's screen sharing, but he cannot control whether his screen is on stage or not. I'm going to put it on stage.
Okay.
If anything goes wrong, if I disconnect or anything, just keep in mind that that's something that you and I have to manage. Did Camilla want to join us today before I forget?
I wait a second. I sent her a link. Just go on. Just go on.
Okay, thank you. Nik, I'm putting you on stage.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, you got the stage.
All right, cool. You're supposed to see my GitHub page already on the screen. So before we start working on the code, I wanted to a bit introduce where the clean architecture and TDD makes sense and maybe where it's over engineering or over practice. I work with a bank that's ÄRSTE explicitly with Erste Digital. That's a company that's responsible for digital banking solution of the bank. And I'm working on payment systems. Therefore, in my case, it's an enterprise application. We are working on more than 2 million lines of code, just React, just front-end side. And we are dealing with people money. Therefore, the responsibility of what we ship is breathtaking, at least for me, because I'm not allowed to make a mistake. I'm not allowed to ship something that will broke. Just picture an example that you are authorizing to your digital banking app, and you see a negative balance where it should be a positive because of the bug the developers created. I cannot afford that, okay? Because people will lose trust to the bank I'm working with, and they will switch to another one, and that's a big failure for our business, okay? Therefore, quality is the first priority in my experience in my work, okay? And we put a lot of effort to build systems that helps us to ship things with quality, to make sure we have checkpoints, we have insurance and so forth that helps with this. And building software using test-driven development is one of the keys where you could go with quality first. And here with this example, I will present a bite-sized feature that we will build, okay? And this bite-sized feature might look like over-engineering because it will be a small app. We will employ clean architecture, design patterns, and principles. We will do test-driven development of that, and you might get an impression that it could be easier to do without all this stuff, and that's true. On that size of the app, that's true. But when you go to real applications, which has dozens of features, which has a responsibility, which needs to bring business value, then this stuff makes sense, okay? So I believe I wanted to explain this upfront so people who work in startups and didn't validate the product market fit first might say that this is too much. What for to do this if we will throw away the code probably next month? I agree with this. This is over engineering.
Luckily, banks have very good product market fit. So, Nik, I see there's a lot of beginners in chat. You are quite an advanced TDD practitioner. Is there something bite-sized that you can give them to sort of help them follow along?
Well, I will try to make it simple for anyone interested. So follow me, and if you have ever did some React, then it shall be absolutely understandable for you how it's going on.
Can you, before you start, can you give you a little bit of insight what exact tech stack you use for, let's say, we know React, but how is React run? What plugin? How do you test? With what do you test, and why?
Perfect question. All right, so my setup is I'm using TypeScript all over the code base. You have to see my IDE now open. And for a bundler, I'm using 𝗂𝗲𝗃𝗲. That's a default setup. I add some aliases here, but in general, it's just copied from their documentation. For unit testing, I'm using vtest. And it's
my favorite choice as well.
Also here. And I point to the pattern of the files that are qualified for unit tests. I run coverage that vtest provides. I could show this during the workout as well. And for integration testing, that's where I integrate units into React code. I'm using Cypress. I will show this as well. It's an alternative to Playwright, maybe you have heard from Microsoft, or alternative to React testing library as well. It already interacts with the DOM, and that's for the test is a bit different. And
from what I saw in the GitHub repo, you're using a setup with Cypress where you are creating a controlled mount point. So you are isolating the components you're testing, and there will be some JSX in the test code as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for end-to-end tests, I use also normally Cypress end-to-end. That's a different setup a bit. And within today's session, I won't write end-to-end tests because in reality, only a few companies can afford to spin up the backend environment specific for the test with a state that test expects. Because it's a big investment from perspective of maintainability of such a spin-ups. Many people are doing end-to-mock test where they are mocking the boundary.
The virtual service,
boundary, API endpoints, but today I will go with unit tests and integration tests because for these kind of apps that we will build today, it will be kind of okay. All right, so this is from regardless tech stack in place, so I can start my application already.
Please.
One second, there is already a comment. I'm working in a startup company and some engineers said the quantity is more important than the quality. Tuan is asking or stating. What do you guys think about this?
Is this in regards to quantity and the quality of tests, or quantity or quality of output?
It is about. It is a response to what Nik said in the beginning. With quality is very important in the banking sector.
Totally agree. When you are in a startup and your product market fit is not valid yet, so you are not really on a setup, on a stage where you already create a business value and have revenue from that, and the only way is to go forward. So you are uncertain still. The quantity makes much more sense because you want to verify ideas as soon as possible to find that model that will work. And as soon as you find one, by throwing away different stuff and putting in place as quick as possible, and you find one and it works, then you will be serving customers and people in that direction. And at that point, when your business will be already going forward, or your company's business, you will understand, okay, now actually it's time to invest in quality because people are already there. We have certain amount of customers, they are paying. We cannot fail the software now with quick stuff.
Your opportunity cost. So it's just not it's not just outage, it's also opportunity cost. So there's an expectation of growth, there's an expectation of new services, there's an expectation that things will be okay for Black Friday, etc.
Exactly.
So one response, TDD is focus on the quality, but the quality is difficult to measurement than the quantity. So it is hard to manage. Could you give some tips to how to measure quality?
Nick, I would suggest you continue with your coding example, and I will answer to one in the meantime, because we did address this in the previous stream, if you don't mind.
But I want to address actually how to measure quality. I have the slide for that. Here is a diagram that I put together. How can we measure actually? We are bringing business value with the next increment, with the next piece of code that we will ship or no, okay? And the only measure that I found is like, does this increment has tests? And explicitly, if this is a feature, does this feature has some user journey test covered? Let's say you are in a bank app and your feature is to make a payment, to enable people to make a payment. Do you have a coverage for that journey? You come, you enter some amount, you enter some recipient, then you want to sign that payment, and the payment is like gone. If you have a coverage for that, then you can check like a coverage of other features that you have in built before. And if both are passing, like your new coverage for a new increment and all other existing tests, then you can measure that you want, at least you want, destroy the existing business value by breaking something. You know that you're shipping something. It might not be useful for your customers, but business value is not always useful. Business value is also that you ship something that works and helps you to verify whether it's useful or no. That's also business value, okay? In case you don't ship with tests, you don't ship that increment with tests, or some of the tests from existing setup, when you ship the increment are breaking, then you are in risk zone, because you don't know first whether your increment actually will bring value, because you are not confident whether it works or no. Plus, you may even decrease the business value of the previous setup of your app, because you might break some some features that worked before. So you decrease the business value in that case, and I think this is a valid measure.
Yeah, you shouldn't assume that your business requirements, that all the assumptions you make going into the business project, that they're correct, that your order is correct, that the features that you thought were important were correct, that the level of detail, the level of investment that you're deciding to spend on it is correct, right? So the feedback you're getting from the test is, are you even capable of objectively describing what the final result will be? That's what a critical user journey test would represent, right? Because I see you use this term a lot, like CUJ. That's a more outside in type of testing, more in the sort of domain-driven design. So using user-facing language to describe, okay, how does the user expect to see the output of this successful testing scenario? And we're just using the test really to automate this conversation. Like, does this make sense to the user? Does this work? Is it correct that we say it has to work this way or that way? And crafting that is as much important as it is to actually implement the feature. It's very difficult to implement something. We had a question from Nihad. So if I understand correctly, TDD doesn't work if I'm not working on a product. Absolutely, it doesn't work if you're not building on the product, because TDD is primarily a business tool, a business discipline. Now you can do TDD if you're not working in a business per se. We use TDD in katas, but we are very explicit. We're doing TDD in a silly way in order to deliberately practice something. The business problem is deliberate practice, right? So that has to be understood, right? And even in this kata, there will be an underlying sort of breaking the fourth wall kind of mix of deliberate practice and business concerns. So that's sort of implicit, that's implied with Nick's presentation today.
All right, Denis. Yeah, let me finally start. So
Let's go.
We have at the moment this bite-sized fintech hub that just lists some links here that leads to some features. Okay. And here my business analyst prepared for me some new business requirement that we need to implement. Explicitly, we need to enable the customer to create virtual credit cards. And the acceptance criteria that business analyst put in place for me is the following. So first, we need to create a new page where we will be able to create the credit cards. And there will be some button, probably which we will click, that will create a credit card and display it. We need to enhance our main navigation with a new item. So when clicking it, I bet somewhere here in between these. When clicking one, it will navigate to that page. And I believe when you clicked some button within that page, you are supposed to, I see here, connect to some Visa SDK that will help us to create a card actually. And our job will be to ask Visa to do this, get that data from them and display in some format. And here is explained that the credit card number shall be with these spaces in between 4 digits and the date shall be formatted like this. And there is also one more case that we need to display some important information below the card. And there is a detail. Let's look at the design. This will nail it down. So here, designer dropped me some visuals where the new item comes in. So it's between cards and portfolio, somewhere here. Okay, we will put it. When clicking it, it's supposed to go to this page. We have to create this page. And there will be this button by default. I guess no credit card will be in place. But as soon as you click that button, then we will communicate with Visa through their SDK, and they will provide hopefully us the card because they are responsible for issuing cards in this fintech. And this is how we shall render this card. And this is this important information that we need to display. I guess it just will be hard-coded directly in React, some sentence, okay? And there is some integration specification that I was given in regards to Visa SDK. So as I see here, this is a package. I could actually already installed this package or module from NPM, let's say. And it exposes for us 2 methods. Maybe it exposes more, but we are interested in 2 things, actually. One method that creates a card, and that's the interface of the card. And here is an example of how the interface they provide looks like. You know, there is ID of the card, that's probably a number of the card, and that's in a format of number, not a string, and doesn't have any spaces after every 4th digit. The holder is probably the name on the card. Expiry day is that date that we need to display. It comes in a format of the date, and so forth, okay? So I already have some snippet that business analysts probably copied from the documentation, even how to use this SDK. Cool. Oh, and even an input, an example of output.
This is what you would expect on like an open API sort of auto-generated documentation for like an API or an SDK.
Yeah, cool. So this is an example what they can return us. All right. So how do I approach these kind of tasks? Okay. First, what I think is the following, like, how can we and what shall we test here? And for me, reading these acceptance criteria, there is a clear like path. There will be a page. On the page will be a button. So I have to be on that page. I have to click that button. And when clicking the button, afterwards, I expect on the page to see the card. And the data will be formatted. And so I guess this page. So this, I click here, I see this. This is a journey. This is a user journey within my application. This is tasks that customers will come to complete. And therefore, for such a journeys, I pretend to always write some kind of tests that are 100% behavior driven. So let's start with this right away, okay?
Okay.
So I'm back to my IDE. In source, I will try to see what happens now. There is some app inside, some routing already in place, probably React router in place. There is some design system I see. Okay, let's explore. That's internal one. There are some components exposed for me. I see the card component, some layout component, title component. That's internal design system, okay? Let's not get deep into it. I build it in favor to more focus on how to implement business value rather than build HTML. Okay?
Does make sense, yeah.
So
Makes sense.
it's available here.
It's very clean architecture. It speaks what the application is about.
Here are 2 pages at the moment. Landing page, let's explore that. It's actually that menu that we have seen with different links. So here, I suppose we'll add another one in place. And and that's basically it. So what we start is creating a new file. And I'm thinking about the domain first. What is the domain here within this particular acceptance criteria? And domain is about cards. So, okay, I create a folder that will be called cards. And within cards, I might have multiple use cases. In that case, just one use case. So I create a folder called use cases, and now I name my use case. Okay, and the name for a use case could be something like this. Okay, create virtual card.
It's one of the user journeys.
Yeah, user journeys, exactly. And under this user journey, we could, for example, create some test directory and even start writing the test up front.
Very good.
Let's name it create virtual card again.
Very enterprisey. I like the naming convention of the folder structure.
So we name the test file even the same way like we name
like you would normally in a large project.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so this is the first step, and we will write it with Cypress and with Cypress components testing. And that's very similar syntax like jest or retest or so, but some caveats are different. Okay.
It's very declarative. It's much more declarative, whereas jest will give you a little bit more freedom.
Yeah. So here in description of my particular test, I want to explain my user journey. Okay. An explanation of my user journey could be something like create a virtual card and see its details.
And it's important, it's in plain English, right? Like you don't want to be very technical in these tests.
No,
it's not behavior.
Exactly. Otherwise, they are coupled with technical details and these details might get outdated soon. Yeah. All right. With Cypress components testing, we normally need to render some component, and I have some methods prepared. And here, I will try to render a page that doesn't yet exist. Let's name it. Let's name it something like virtual card page. This component doesn't exist, but I already envision that it will be there. Okay.
So you basically do red-green test driven development,
reflector,
right?
Yeah.
I do high-level test first.
Nick, like an outside-in, an acceptance test, what we would consider not a developer test, not a unit test, but more outside-in, touching the DOM, integrating, even if it's a digital integration in process, there is a little bit more contract boundary testing rather than just a pure unit test.
Yeah, so I mounted the page, let's say, and second step is that there will be a button on that page. So I try to find that button by using some selector. For example, that would be data test selector, where the value will be create card, let's say. And then I found it in the DOM, okay, on the page, and I click it. After I click that page, I expect to see the card. What will we assert from the card? Okay. From the card, I think it makes sense to assert some digits from the number that are displayed, and maybe nothing else. Okay.
It has to
In
be
this
the right
kind
card, right? So the user expects it to be a
Exactly.
specific card, so maybe it should be the right name. Maybe it should match the user's name.
Yeah. So for example, I envision that there will be some div or some element, in HTML code that will tell that this is a virtual card, for example.
But it's not important, right? It's not important that it's a div, but just that it's something.
Yeah.
Something
and
separate.
This element shall contain, let's say, you said the name, let's say, write the name Denis in, for example, and there we assert that for Denis, it should be visible. Okay, and let's do another one, not just Denis, but let's assert first 4 digits of the card also to be presented within there.
Yeah.
Plus, as I remember from this acceptance criteria, there is this information block. I think it's here. Okay.
That's part of the design. I see.
Yeah,
so
let's assert its presence as well.
Virtual card can do.
Yeah, let's assert its presence as well, just so it's there. Maybe it doesn't.
Would you normally?
Yeah.
Would you normally do multiple assertions in a low-level test? Is this breaking the rules because this one's one of the more top-level ones, or is this normal for you in a Cypress test?
This is a high-level test, therefore I will do many assertions if necessary.
Okay.
In a low-level test, we will come to that. Unit test, I will do just 1 assertion per test.
Thank you. Thank you for that differentiation.
And
for those of you who are watching us on other platforms, we dropped the GitHub repo link initially in the LinkedIn chat. I now also rebroadcasted it on YouTube and Twitch for those of you who want to follow along. Go ahead.
All right, we have this test prepared. It replicates some user journey in place that happens on a certain page, the page that we only envisioned that doesn't exist. Obviously, if I start the test, that it will immediately fail because this page doesn't even exist. This component doesn't even exist.
Yep.
Okay. So to start the test, I will create that component somewhere nearby, maybe with empty stuff. Okay. So there will be this TSX component.
Step 1, make it compile.
Yeah. So something like this, and there, let's say, we'll return whatever we want for now, just to make sure that we can compile the test and it runs. We import that. My ID suggest, and we are ready to start the test. Okay, I will stop the VTEM and I will run the test. I have some commands prepared, for example, test integration that will boot Cypress. Here is how it looks like. It immediately finds by pattern the file that matches, and we can click it and it will try to run something. And it renders our X div you see here, but obviously the test file fails on the place where we try to create, to find a DOM element that has this data test selector. It's not there, nothing implemented and so, but I already have a test in place. And this test actually gave me a clear understanding what to build before I wrote any production code, let's say, okay? This is what the beauty of this like test-driven development. You write one test, one acceptance test, and you think about what the desired outcome will be. And this forms in your head as this understanding. For me personally, that's a half job done, because I know what to build and I documented that in a form of test now. So whenever these tests pass, I know, okay, actually I built something that I initially was planned for.
But you did the really other half of the really important decision, and we have a question for that from Rafshan. are test IDs considered as a last resort in querying elements? Because you are querying with data properties. So you are giving hints to where to help you for selection. Because you have defined the test in a very clear way, in such a way that there are multiple ways how to implement this. Like you didn't say it has to be a div. You didn't say it has to be a div that's inside another div with a certain ID. So you gave the developer a lot of freedom, but still captured the behavior of the system. And that's the most important part.
That's extremely important for the maintainability later, because otherwise you will always have red tests by every little change you do.
For refactoring, for redesigning.
The best test is the one that fails only when behavior changes, but never when the inner production code changes. If we change div to some other element, if you do any production changes, but behavior didn't change, your test shall stay green still. This is a good test because it won't waste your time.
Andrea does have another question. I was assuming that you would start from the button virtual card in the home page. Is there a specific reason by which you started directly from the page?
Because my user journey occurs on that page. So I always start with the user journey. How can I capture my user journey? My user journey is happening on this page, so I focus on that page, therefore.
That would be more implementation specific, let's say behavioral for this, for what kind of feature you're building. If we change the home page to be somewhere else, or if you're coming in from a landing page, then you're already meddling with the purity of the behavior with some other.
All right, so we have a test. I will keep this Cypress running like it is. It will automatically refresh when I change my code. And so let's build some skeleton for our output using the design system that I have in place. So I have some...
Just to honor Ravshan with a follow-up question, it will be okay to use the ARIA accessibility selectors as well, rather than data flags for...
This is very good point, actually. If you can afford that, really, to select your DOM structure using accessibility selectors, then do it for sure.
So it has to be unique. There mustn't be any accidental clashes across your...
Yeah, this will help also to assert that your application is accessible. Okay. So I'm compiling some stuff using design system according to the design. I put already some card back to the design. This is hero title here. I now will put the card in, the button in place. So there will be some page.
Oh, I love your design system.
Contents.
It's great.
And there will be some button. And the button, what will it say? What the button shall say? Create new card. Okay. So I will put create new card label here, and I won't forget to add here some test ID from the test. So I know that this is create card, actually. I'm copying it from here. Back here, we already have a button. Let's see what happens with the test. The test already found a button here at that step, and we managed to click it, actually. And now the next assertion is failing because there should be some virtual card, but virtual card is not here yet. Anyway, the skeleton is ready. The test is still failing because we didn't complete it yet, everything. And let's go further, okay? We could also add the first acceptance criteria to the landing page to add that menu item. So for example, somewhere in between here, we could duplicate this, and let's name this virtual card and name it virtual card, or how it was named here. Virtual card, yeah. Virtual card, and let's copy this path here and also add it to my React router. So there shall be some new route, I guess. And this route shall say something like this, and it will point to finally my virtual card page. That's some additional stuff to the skeleton, but it won't move on as farther. That's just some stuff from acceptance criteria. Okay, we are ready with the skeleton. Let's move on to the key part, like retrieving the card and cooperating with the Visa SDK. Okay, and for that, I want to make sure that this code that will be orchestrating calls to Visa SDK and delivering the data to the view is somewhere separate. I want my view, so React component, just render and nothing else, okay? And here it's worth, I guess, to look at my slide here.
You want the integration with the actual SDK to be separate from the definition of what it means to create a virtual card.
Yeah, so I want to follow these clean architecture layers, you know, and my view layer is what we just put with some GS6 syntaxes, with some HTML, and its responsibility is only to render some stuff. Now I want to create this use case layer, functional layer, that will orchestrate my user journey, okay? And we will come up with some other layers too. So for that, I'm actually creating a hook. That's normally an orchestrator. Oh, that's normally an orchestrator in React.
Don't worry, my desktop looks like that as well.
Busy people, yeah. So for example, I'm creating a hook like this, and it will be export function use some, ID suggest me to do this. And I want actually this to return some certain card. And I also want that this provides me availability to handle a click on the button. So I will introduce some method which will be called create card, or let's name it like most developers in React community do, something like handle, I don't know, handle click for now, okay? I don't like this naming.
A naming convention that is behavioral, but also gives a little bit of a hint on like what
I like this actually, create card, actually what it does, you know. And this might be some async code, let's say, because we will call an SDK. And here we will call an SDK, and let's recap how it was described in the documentation. So actually, we could create a variable and call a asynchronous method that will bring us this kind of object. Quite straightforward, right? But look, in this handler, whenever we put something like candidate, let's call it candidate, and here we will do a wait, create virtual card.
Nick, I'm answering a few questions already that are sort of basic or infrastructure specific. We are starting a few of them that are particular for you, and then in a few minutes we'll sort of give you a moment to maybe go through a few of them. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
To capture the card, I will need some state, and this state will give me, let's say, card, and set card as the setter. And here, theoretically, I would do set card, and there will be the card. Card is returned, plus I will return this one. And now I employ this hook directly into my page, somehow like this. And there will be card and create card, and I can tie the create card to this button. Looks good. And the card I could use to actually display the card somewhere there when it's available, right? By default, it's not available because my state is empty here by default, but whenever we call the candidate, here I made a mistake. We set this candidate here in place, and everything is like all good.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. Here is some TypeScript issue because it doesn't know the type of that. So let's copy the type that Visa provides here. Okay. So let's set it here with TypeScript to clearly state that this is actually a type that Visa gives us. Okay. Now the error is gone. This is in place, TypeScript is happy, all good. Card is in place. Now, look, this code doesn't have any if condition, doesn't have any data transformation, doesn't have any logic, let's say. But there is still a business logic. Because business logic, let's quickly look what it is. What is business logic? And what is not business logic? Business logic is not that code that you see normally in these hooks where you use state and so forth. Business logic are if statements, some logical control structures, loops, data transformations, data extraction, data retrieval, or side effects, usage of side effects. In our case, we are using some SDK. It's just one line. Here, and that's line is a business logic. Okay,
and there's a protocol to it, and there's a behavior to the protocol. In this case, that it is asynchronous and not process.
And what is not business logic is usage of React hooks, use state, and so state management usage, JSX code. It's not business logic, it's an orchestration logic. It's a code that integrates things together. Okay.
It's glue.
Yeah, it's glue, right term.
But in a good overview, and this is very important. So what I see so often or saw in the past is that you have those huge React big ball of mutts where you have everything in every place munched together somehow. And this is what we really should avoid, especially when using React, because it becomes not only hard to read, it becomes, for React itself, there are so many issues you can create with re-rendering problems and all this kind of stuff that you should follow what Nik just said and have a very clear idea of how you abstract things and how you order things in order to create a clean architecture. This is great what is right now.
Absolutely. So as soon as we have a business logic, there is in clean architecture a specific functional layer for that. And that layer is called a service layer. Okay. So even in such a simple example, it looks like not necessary to create another indirection, another abstraction. I want today to show you how we build these enterprise grade applications, because at the end, this separation of concerns will help us to reduce amount of changes we will have to make to incorporate next business requirements, you know? And for me personally, the first criteria of a clean code is amount of changes you have to make to incorporate next feature. Okay, that's for me criteria.
Yeah, and as a business expert, as an expert in the domain, you have put the abstraction in the place where the most likely change will be. So
but I would like to add something, and this is very important for me to say now. You talk about enterprise. Enterprise, many people assume very large companies with that. In my opinion, that kind of architecture should already be implemented as soon as you leave the prototyping phase of your application, because your application will grow, and no matter if you have 5 people or 500 people working on an application, you will have the same problems very early on. As soon as you want to change things, add things, you will come into this problem state, and it doesn't matter if you have enough seniors or not, it will become a problem. So I would say what you just say it is already good for small companies as well.
Enterprise doesn't mean multi-billion-dollar FAANG company. Enterprise can mean we are in a stable domain. We are a bank. We are a fintech company, and this code has to survive 5 years, and it has to be touched by up to 20 developers over these 5 years. That's already enterprise, right? So the original author will no longer be with the company. The maintainers might be somewhere in the future, a different team. That's already check. Like that's already necessary. Even if you're a small company with like 20 people, you're already in this bucket of, yes, you probably need this level of indirection.
I agree with this. Yeah, I think it's more enterprise. You could describe that you have a team of people who work on the same code. So you have some peers with you, not you alone. And the code already requires or has implemented a certain amount of features. And of course, the last criteria is that your business is already running. It's not that you didn't validate it. You have a business, it's running, and you want to make it move forward. Okay.
Nik, are there any comments? If you can look at your other screen, are there any comments that are starred that you would like to address?
Not sure which screen you mentioned.
The StreamYard Studio. If you go to the comments in the top right sidebar, we have a few starred ones that we've picked for you. If there's any in there that you would like to address, we've already filtered them out.
I would quickly respond to what Ramiro says is, in my opinion, so he's asking, even in a very early stage product, always think about that your early stage is on some point not early stage anymore. Yeah. It is always hard to change. Yeah, it is always hard to change. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's always hard to change architecture later on. Architecture is foundational. And if you build a house, your foundation is the stuff you basically can't change. And you should always see it like that. And the second question you have is with the juniors, be very careful about that. Architecture is something you need to do no matter what type of level your team does have. If you don't have the level to execute, this is a dysfunction you need to fix. But you cannot just say, I've just junior, I don't need to do that, because you run against a wall in the next year.
If you have a lot of juniors in your company, I would rely on Nik's guidance, to have Nik on the team and guide the juniors with more structure rather than too little structure.
Yeah. So one question that picks me up here, that some LinkedIn user, I don't see a name here, unfortunately, was expecting that I will test first hook. And then do some implementation. And Carlos already tried to handle this question correctly. We don't test implementation details. We don't test
the glue.
hooks. We don't
test the glue.
We don't.
The glue is already tested. React has already covered the glue.
And here I think I want to show you the vision how I see like any type of tests. And I see like in React, any type of tests should be a black box. Your application, from perspective, like your production code doesn't have to be coupled with your test code. Test code doesn't have to know about how you implement stuff, using use effect, use callback, using use state, whatever. It doesn't matter to the test. This is the aim, to write these resilient tests. The test that will stay when you refactor the code, when you change your state to some Redux or React query or whatever. The test shall stay green if the behavior doesn't change. Doesn't matter where you store your data now, internally or externally or anyhow. So that's the idea. I have some input, some arrangement in my test and some output, but what is inside test doesn't know. That's the best test, the resilient one.
Okay. Would you like to continue? Are you good on time? We're along the halfway point. If you're in a time crunch for the coding bit, we can go fully focused on the coding.
Let's do this now, because I'm not even half on the place. Yeah.
Let's focus more on the coding.
All right, this is business logic, and I know that this business logic is iteration with my SDK, with the outside world. So actually, if we look back to our layers here, that business logic looks like exactly the adapter because it interacts with the outside world, with an API, with a network, with SDK, with some side effect that we don't have ownership about. Okay. So I will therefore abstract it away and even unit test it separately. Even it's so simple, I will do this anyway. And for that purpose, I will create something like this. I will create a unit test.
This reminds me of hexagonal architecture to some degree with the adaptive terminology.
Yeah. I will do some imports here, for example, describe. That's in this case needed because I didn't enable globals.
I also don't. So I commend you for doing it this way because I also don't like the global
namespace. Yeah, and it will be, let's name it just adapter for now. And there will be one test which could, let's say something like returns card. And with unit tests, I always start to write them upside down. I start with assertion first. So I would expect something.
Then you follow the errors.
And this expect actually comes from here. It also comes from here. Okay. I'll expect there will be some result. And that result will be equal to some card. Okay, nothing exists yet, but I'm already projecting how it will be. And the result will be a matter of executing some create card function. It doesn't exist as well. I'm just trying to think how I design that adapter. And the adapter, my adapter, will be a factory function, a function that creates another function. This is useful. Maybe that will look like over-engineering, but I will show you later why it's not. And for that adapter, I will create some arrangement here. And let me copy-paste some arrangement.
For those of you who want to Google this pattern, this is called a factory method, but it can also be referred to as currying in JavaScript. So if you want to look it up.
That were basically common patterns 10 years ago, but I just as you say it right now, it seems to be a little bit lost in the newer React world already. And it's nice to see it coming back up again here in this presentation. Back then, when I was working a lot with Zen framework and stuff like this, those patterns were basically standard in those frameworks. No, currying,
they were
more
object-oriented. Yeah, more object-oriented, less so functional currying.
If you use prototype.js, for example, there was even a function called curry.
Let's not go to jQuery now.
No, not jQuery. Prototype.
I know what you mean.
Okay, so I created such a file. Such a test, and this test assumes there will be some create virtual card adapter where I know that this code I talked before will be communicating with an outside world, in that case with an Visa SDK. So I create a fake for my Visa SDK that will return me a fake card following the interface that Visa SDK actually provides. This fake is has similar interface with what Visa SDK has in our description of the similar to this one.
It is a stub, a test double that is virtual, but it is not a mock.
Precisely. So I pass it in some options into my code that will consume it. So so I can run the tests without actually going to the outside world. Okay. All right. So this is how my unit test looks like. We can start it. and I started it, and I will, of course it fails. It even references that this function doesn't exist at the beginning because I just pictured it in my head first. And I start and create actually that adapter.
But it's good to see that the test is failing for the right reason. That's the most important part of the red phase.
And let's create that function finally. I will copy that name here. Like this, there will be these options where I pass fake. And let me put that let's say will be optional. And the option was, if I go back to my test file, was create. It's called create. Okay. So I will describe there will be some create method that returns me a promise with a credit card interface from Visa SDK. Okay. That's what I described. And first thing what we can do here we can fix the TypeScript, is import this into the test. So we importing using a IDE. It's done automatically. Now I can run something already. And the test, of course, still fail. I don't have any implementation. Even this is saying that it's not callable. TypeScript claims about that, and it makes sense because I don't have anything inside. Yeah, nothing. It returns nothing at the moment. Yeah. So let's try to implement what I mean. And the implementation will be super simple. I will try to create this. I'll take create from my options, from my argument here, if it exists. Otherwise, if it's not provided, I will take that from the Visa SDK.
You're already stubbing it to be easily injected.
Where is my Visa
Because you already
SDK?
have a need for it.
This one. Yeah. Let's fix this import in place. So if it's provided, like for a test case, then it's taken that implementation. Otherwise, in production code, this adapter couples with the outside world. It couples with the SDK. And here I will return the expected interface. There will be a function that just calls this create. That's it. We will run the test and the test pass.
Yeah. So it's testing that both sides of the glue are protocol are concretely implementing the protocol that you've defined that you will need to actually test and run it.
Exactly. So now we could go back to our use case functional layer and implement that. Implement the usage of this adapter for now. For example, we will have.
This is where Cypress touches the thing we just defined with the unit test. So we are in on an integration boundary.
So adapter, yeah, we call this. This provides me a function. Let's say we name this function similar to this one. Or no, let's not name it yet. Let's keep it like this. And we see that we are gone from one dependency. So this functional layer is not anymore connected to the Visa client, especially the method. Yes, it still takes the credit card here. That's fine, but only as a type. There are no dependency between cards. That's important. So we delete it, and we can actually, I will copy that name. I will delete the dependency, and I will rename this.
So we kept the name, we kept the signature of the function, but we have made it less coupled to the original implementation of the SDK.
Extremely
well, we moved the coupling.
Yeah.
We moved the coupling from the use case layer into the adapter layer at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's what
here
the adapter
it's still
does.
coupled.
Yeah, this
it's still coupled.
Yeah.
This is often not mentioned quality like substitutability, where you can exchange part of the codes without touching, as long as the interface stays the same. And
you're creating a seam of separation on the area most likely to change, or most likely to break because of third-party vendors, etc.
Yeah. All right, so we already grabbed the card in certain way. Let's try to go back to our view functional layer and render something here conditionally. So conditional rendering in React, it's done something like this.
I will Boolean, open and then if the Boolean
that
is
fragment,
true,
and luckily I have the card design system that needs a card inside. Plus I remember there was this information box below, so I will put alert for that. It's also from design system. And there will be a title, I guess. Let's see the design. I forgot already about it. So there will be a title and the text of it. So let me copy this text from here. I put the text here, and the title was important.
Yes.
Plus, I remember that my integration test also was asserting both things.
Data types.
So I will go to my test and copy, not this test, but another test.
The query selectors.
This one, and copy the virtual card and information. Okay. So I'm back here. This will be data test virtual card, and this is data test information already in praise. So we're already rendering something. Let's see what the state of our setup. Something still happens, we are not getting yet a card. Oh, some card already displayed because it arrived from Visa, but the output is screwed up. And the TypeScript actually claims for that. So the design system card has a different prop than the Visa. So our goal is to remap that to the proper stuff. So you see this interface from the design system requires name, number, valid, and so forth. And from the Visa, we see that the output doesn't have number, name, and so it has different stuff. And the date is like a date instance.
Uses different jargon.
Yeah, but we actually will need this kind of date. Plus the number shall be formatted. So we need to remap this. So so this means that our view layer now requires some information, some model probably, view model, that's a term probably, that we need to create because it doesn't fit one-to-one to the SDK interface, let's say.
A mapping, a view model, a reducer, like whatever store, whatever paradigm you're using, these are equivalent terms for a presentation layer.
So that's a service layer with a business logic inside. Formatting, data transformation is a business logic. So I'm creating a test. Unit test, again, could be named like this.
Because it's detail-oriented. It's not critical user journey-oriented.
Now I will copy some stuff from my another test, this one.
But it's interesting to see how you're going about it from both ends, right? So you have the critical user journey. We are done when the critical user journey is green. But in order to make it green, we also have to create those little detail tests to make it sort of in parallel, design it inside in and outside and inside out.
Virtual card, page service, let's call it like this. It will have application logic, the application logic that will format some data to explicitly view requirement. The view needs it in this format, so we will do it.
This is design-oriented, UX-oriented, language translation-oriented. So it's more presentational.
And maybe we could name it like this, and there will be this, and returns model. For now, like this. Again, I'm starting bottom down. with this, and I expect that there will be some result that will be equal. My view model will have a card, and that card will be that interface that my design system needs.
Component, yeah. You have a
Yeah,
black
so
box. The output is the
so let
component
me check
props.
this. So
The
this
input
one
is the SDK.
okay. So I'll copy this stuff back to my card. Here we go. And there will be some stuff. Let's say the name will be this. The number could be formatted. So let me copy actually it from the description. Let me copy this. And valid also, let me copy this. That would be output. We are aiming to render this part. And the code will be the CVC, and the color will be, let's say, red.
Makes sense.
That's my expectation. Now I will create the result variable, and finally I will create the function that will do this. Create a virtual card model, for example. And the input will be the card that comes from the SDK. And the interface of the SDK, I will copy actually from my tickets somewhere here, example.
Nick, we have a thank you from Joseph. Joseph mentions, great work, Nick. As a junior React developer working in a small startup without a mentor, your content really helps me. Keep it up.
Thank you very much.
I would say we go in 3 to 5 minutes. We should go for a comment round because we have comments stacked up. Yeah.
Okay.
All
Nick,
right,
we're doing
so-
what we can to help you sort of alleviate the time pressure. I know it's a live stream and everything, and you're coding. You're doing great.
Are we strict with 2 hours? Are we ending exactly at
We're
6?
not strict. I have bedtime with the kiddos, and Adrian probably has something, but we will do our best to accommodate.
I don't, actually.
Okay, let's continue meanwhile. So we created a test where there is an arrangement part, action part, and assertion part, okay? We picture that there is some function that actually will do the job. So I will stop my current task, that not a current task, but currently running test from a previous adapter. Oh, it's actually this one was running. Okay, let's run it again, no problem. It will, of course, fail because it doesn't compile, cannot find it. Yeah, so I start by creating a service itself.
Nick, are you creating these curried functions opposed to something else like a class because you expect it to be memoized or in other way used in a functional form? Is that implicit here?
No, doesn't matter. If your team prefers arrow functions, use them. My team prefers classic functions, I'm using them.
No, so specifically for the usage of the factory, you're using the factory rather than having a static object because you are keeping it dynamic for memorization and whatever React might need for state updates.
For a factory that we designed in a previous step, I make it a factory, so function returns a function, because in many cases you will need to pass inside some argument,
a state handler,
argument that will be afterwards passed to outside world. For example, that's ID of the card or maybe authorization.
So it will have more infrastructural detail that you want to isolate now as soon as you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So method is in place. We import it. Our test will finally compile at least, but still will fail, I guess. Yeah, it claims it doesn't return anything, and here we go. Some issue is there because we don't return anything. So let's work on the implementation. Let's copy this first.
But it fails for the right reason.
Yeah. And
And this is a typical black box text test.
Precisely, yeah. Precisely.
Input is SDK output, or at least adapter output.
Yeah.
And the output out of the black box is the props the state needed to render correctly.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I will return, there will be the card. And now I will remap it according to the necessity of the view layer. And the view layer, like we already pictured in the test, needs this. So some things are easy to remap, like for example, holder is one-to-one. This one, let's see what card is. CVC is the number. At least we can put it as a string, because I think that was the demand by component. And color, I think it's direct mapping. Yeah, it's string to string. All good. These two are complicated. We already ran a test. The tests pass well because I just hard-coded stuff inside. Okay, but let's remap it correctly. Okay, so let's make it fail.
Because it's formatted. The data is there, but you're formatting it.
But it's not formatted by Visa, you know, so that's our task actually, to format.
Yeah.
So first I will format the date in a specific format. So I will extract the month from the date. Card, expiry.
Rafik mentions he could stay until midnight watching this.
So card expiry get month, plus I need to put some +1, because the get month returns you 0 index month. But we won't put the 0 index month on the cards. And I think I want to prepend also the 0 if the month is less than 10.
1 digit, yeah.
Yeah.
Left padded. Yeah.
So for this, I will convert it to a template string. So it becomes a string for me. And then afterwards, I will do path start function with argument 2 and prepending 0 if they are less than this.
Yeah.
This will be for months, and for the year, I will take year will be card expiry get full year to string, and I need only last 2 digits of the year, because get full year gives me the 4 digits.
Correct.
I need a last 2, and for that we need it probably slice -2 will give this output.
Correct. For those of us who are following live, if you're in TypeScript and you don't have these functions on the string and on the array methods, check your tsconfig. You might not have the correct target set, so it has to be ES. It has to be ES next, or the more modern target for ECMAScript. Otherwise, the more TypeScript friendly string and array functions will not be available to you for hinting in your IDE, if that's a problem. VS Code users, you know what I'm talking about.
And now I will concatenate the desired outcome here. So let's see what our test says. vtest has this beautiful link to see the difference. And now I see that we are almost there. You see, we have valid, which is correctly mapped.
That is correct.
But here we return nothing. Shall be this.
Yeah.
And if we return here directly the card.id and run this test, let's see the difference again. The difference is that Visa does give it as a number without any formatting. Yeah. So that's our job, to make it like formatted here.
We just need a space on the
on those specific to do this, let's introduce the variable number, and we take the card.id, turn it into a string, because visa gives us a number, and maybe using replace, because I'm proficient with regex.
Right? With regexes, you're going to split it on the exact number of digits.
Exactly.
Nik does this professionally a lot, so for those of you watching live, you don't have to be this fluid with it. Nik does this every day, probably. So Nik knows these regexes by heart.
And I will trim
But thank you, Nik, for showing us something that's very close to your heart.
But it's very valuable to learn regex very early on. I'll just pass you a great link, regex 101. I love
as long
that
as you're not
platform.
parsing HTML with it, I'm happy.
Yeah. Just quickly to explain what happens here is that I'm taking this ID of the card, turning into string, and after every, so I try to replace every 4 digits of that with the same digits plus space, okay?
Yeah.
And at the end, I obviously will have a space, so I trim that space. So let's see what the difference is still there, where we are not passing.
You think we made a mistake? Oh no, we didn't add it to the... We didn't... Oh, we did.
I did. So what's the mistake? Still, actual is this one, expected this one, so it doesn't actually do anything.
I think we had an error up above. The one that
Maybe here is a mistake.
I think that's the one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Our view model is more or less ready, but there is one case that it could be undefined. And actually, if we look at our use case layer, it's true. You see, by default, the state is empty until you click that button that will generate for us a card. So by default, it's empty, and we have to handle that case. So another baby step here. We turn into the test and write something like, this one will be a quick one, returns.
I'd ask you to pause after we finish this test.
Undefined, oh, not model. That turns model when card is unavailable. Again, no technical terms in descriptions, you see. So bottom down again, bottom up again.
It's a zero state.
To equal the object card undefined.
We had a question where the question was, how come you didn't start with this state? And I see now that it wouldn't have really driven us to the actual implementation. It would have just pushed us further away. And now it's a lot easier to create.
Yeah. So this is another test. And it fails because of reasons, because we don't have this logic, in place. So we go in here.
This requires an if statement.
Precisely, business logic, if statement. So if card is not available, let's exit as soon as possible. Card will be, let's say, undefined, or maybe you could just return an empty object that will fit to. Now we don't need these questions anymore. That's a chaining operator.
Yeah.
Let's replace them.
For those of you who are not familiar with this, the if statement acts as a type guard for the or undefined. So if since we have checked that it's not undefined, then beneath all of those lines of code, beneath line 6, the type changes to, it narrows down to the not undefined version.
Yeah.
Cool. My tests are in place. Now it will be very easy to integrate this. So I take that function.
Nik, could you please pause for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
If you could check out the starred list of questions that we have for you, filtered out for you. Any of those that seem relevant or important to you to answer, the rest I'll slowly type in chat to give them a response.
Yeah. So does React remove all test files when I build the app? I encourage my attendees, actually, like Carlos did already, if you have an answer, because you are intelligent, my audience is in general very intelligent on LinkedIn, so help answering me these questions. I know that you can nail it down even better than I can sometimes.
Awesome.
All right. So I start from the top. Does it make sense to test first what no card was shown, and in a second step after clicking on the button that the virtual card was shown, or is it too much? I think it's too much because by default there is no card shown. It like how as a user, as a customer, I'm actually caring about whether there is something not shown. I think I don't care too much.
The critical path is on the 1
Yeah.
and not the 0. So we
We
could
are
do zombie, but we don't fulfill our ticket that way.
Exactly. We focus on critical user journeys, and critical user journey in that case is to show the card. What is the approach to test apps that needs MFA authentication? Really good question. The approach to test this card is to design the application in such a way that your communicators, the code that communicates to the outside world, including authentication, which will be another adapter, could be inverted. That's actually one key point that I will show in the next step in the code. How
so
to
the
invert
component doesn't have
dependencies.
the prof drill down a dependency manually to pass it along to the adapter.
So Carlos, in this way, in the test code, you will be able to fake your authentication, pretending that user has its token, in place, and then move on.
Yeah.
Or another case is, but how to do it with end-to-end test, or in that case. And normally
with
what I
actual
have seen,
multi-factor.
with
the actual integrator.
So actually how it works, I have seen. You create with authentication provider, let's say it OAuth or some social media authentication SDK or so, you create a testing app with them. And through testing app, you integrate it in your your code in such a way that you just, when the application runs in test mode, then the token and IDs of this app are replaced with testing credentials.
Yes. Pre-authenticated or pre-failing.
And then even there on their side, this authentication provider simplifies the whole flow. You really don't need to do many stuff. You can enter the same password, the same username. You don't have to care about this.
You don't have to refresh the token. You don't have to check the outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is how you test it in end-to-end test, where you cannot do really dependency inversion because you don't have access to even React component, nothing.
Yeah.
How to handle use effect in the hooks? Not sure I understand this question. Maybe somebody from my audience can handle that for Pabudu.
Pabudu has been here from the beginning. I'm sure he'll follow up with a little bit more detail later. We can continue. I will check in with you, Pabudu, in chat.
Tiago, aren't side effects accidentally complexity rather than essential complexity, hence business logic?
I think this was back, this was 4:55 p.m. This was when you were implementing the adapter and then replacing the inversion with the promise with the SDK with the adapter and creating the factory function. So I think this applies to is the idea of the SDK being asynchronous and we now have an interface for it. Is that business behavior? Is that accidental? Should we couple that? Not be coupled to that? So it's a cohesion problem.
Well, I think it's.
My comment here would be in that since it is defined in Nik's ticket, it is not accidental, right? So the side effect is part of the intended behavior. Now, the fact that it carries complexity, we actually want to test cover the part of complexity that is intended behavior. But we don't want to cover the part of the complexity that is not intended behavior. For example, what is the app secret for the SDK? That we don't care about. That we don't want to have in the test. Because that is accidental. The fact that it has an app secret.
Yeah.
There are multiple layers to this, Tiago. I think we can follow up on that afterwards in chat or on the recap.
Thank you very much, Denis. Raul talks about architecture, I think. So Yeah, I think, Raul, it makes sense to, of course, build a system that is easy to change. But there is a problem sometimes. It's called Yagni principle. You aren't gonna need it. You could overcomplicate thinking that your system will be easy to change. So I always feel like, okay, we need to build a skeleton walking architecture, the architecture that is adjustable while your software evolves. So you don't put everything in place right away, slice everything like in all the different functional layers right away, but maybe you start with 2 layers and you feel like it's already a lot of code has side effects, so maybe it's worth to introduce some other layer and so forth and so forth. Evolutionary architecture.
Yeah, evolution and changes in architecture in a code base are only clear looking backwards, like a stock market. But as the team is working on something, it's very hard to predict what exactly will most likely change. Like you can have you look at the backlog and give it your best guess, but that's all you have. A good guess, a good domain specific reason for why you think this will more likely change and this not. And that's how you couple with your architecture.
Yeah.
There's another question where someone is asking to share your Excel draw. Are you intending to share it?
Let's go. Sure, I can. Let's go to Excel-draw and recap what we just did. And we just did outside in TDD. So we started with this acceptance test, a high level test. Then it was failing, obviously, and it still fails, actually. And we moved to doing some composing of React code. We put some HTML inside using design system, created some use case functional layer with a click handler that introduces the start of the use case. And we came up with 2 places of business logic. One was the interaction with an outside world with Visa SDK. We designed it through the unit test. And the second one is where the Visa output didn't fit our application, so we were required to remap it. That's another business logic, so we designed it through baby steps using a small inner circle of TDD. And now we are at the stage where we solved like business logic, and we want actually to look up what happens with our integration test already. Yeah, the goal at the end is make sure that it passes. This is.
Would you have committed the code in its entirety with only the inner circles done, but not the outside? Would you commit an unfinished outside ring?
Yeah, I commit a lot. I would commit every small test separately. And so, because as soon as I commit in small chunks and at some point I need to go, maybe the kid asks me to go now and that's exactly why I can hand over to the colleague just by saying, okay, here is my branch. Just look at it and you will understand what will be the next step.
We had this last time with Brian Finster as well, the very same topic. And it's very recommendable to commit early, push early, and always make sure that what you push actually works. So you can push unfinished features, but not broken code.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we designed this in place. Let's do some more code. We go back to our page, and here we are about to change this to call our function, even not like this, but we will spread its outcome like this and pass here the card. Now our use case returns a model, including the transformed card plus the handler that triggers the use case. It starts the use case, okay? And if we are going back to our views functional layer, there are no more TypeScript problem because the interfaces now here match. We reformatted them. Back to the test. So the card is already displayed, okay, in certain way, but the test still fails because we wanted that there will be Denis, but the visa gives us Nik. Okay. Also, I believe that we will fail with these numbers because in the test we incorporated this is my test. We incorporated that the numbers will be there. Now we can recognize that actually every time we run the test, we are going to the outside world. And even Cypress record there that some SDK actually makes some API request within. We don't know about this. This is not our ownership, you know. Mocking this will be unfair because they
You
can
shouldn't
change
be
it
mocking
in
services
SDK.
you don't own
Exactly.
because they can change.
Exactly,
Yes.
they can change.
Yes.
And here the card is actually generated
or rather, the problem isn't that they can change. The problem is when they change, you want the test to fail. If you mocked it, the test will still pass and it will only fail in production, which is what you don't want.
Exactly. So our test is close to finishing, close to be done, but still the numbers here and the name is generated by the Visa SDK, and it goes to outside world within a test, and that's a signal that it won't work when we run it in continuous integration. Because in continuous integration, we don't want any API request goes to somewhere outside, you know. Actually, in Cypress, we have this stuff. We have a feature in Cypress. Where was that? Maybe in Cypress config. Yeah, we could block any API requests that goes outside of our, let's say, local host. Let's rerun these tests and see what happens now. I blocked anything that is not localhost. Probably my Cypress. Yeah, now it's good.
Very nice.
So we are running again that
It's also
test.
good hygiene to force the developers.
And now Cypress fails even earlier because it recognized that there is some external API request made, and we don't want that. Therefore, Cypress immediately failed even earlier. You know, and therefore we don't see here any card because SDK does some magic within, calls some APIs to get some data, and now we don't get the data. So back to the test.
Awesome.
How would you, just a question to my audience now, how would you make sure that my SDK always returns name that contains Denis and the credit card number that always starts with 1, 2, 3, 4? Just drop a comment.
Awesome. I'll be monitoring. We have a small delay.
Yeah. How would you do this? How would you do this in test? It's a typical solution that is very popular within React development is to do it something like this, where Visa client will be
stopped. And to be clear, which part of the request are we stopping? The request the SDK is making, the response of the SDK, both?
The response. We actually create a fake for the method that SDK has. This is a typical approach, very popular, especially with jest mock. Then you define some model that you want to mock and some method within that model, and you stop what you want it to return. Today also, yesterday or today, there was a discussion in regards test doubles. I think Peter published it, exactly showing this. So this will create my test brittle. Yes. You know why? Because the test now knows that somewhere within this page, there is a production code that actually consumes Visa SDK. And Visa SDK actually has even that method. My test knows it. As soon as we replace Visa SDK to MasterCard SDK, this test will break. As soon as we find some other SDK or maybe start using some API of our bank to get these credit card cards generated, the test will fail. Even the behavior of the software might not. So we will, let's say, use MasterCard, and MasterCard will provide the same output, and the card will be generated, and the user will see the card all fine. But the test will fail because it knows about the implementation detail. So I recommend not doing this. And I would say never do this. Okay. The question is, how else? How else if not?
We have some
mocking.
response.
Yeah. Which are response? Can you, Adrian?
We have. I'm not sure if Henrik
Sabrina mentions mock the promise. Henrik mentions dependency injection. Andrea mentions if it's good for you, I would mock the adapter to avoid calling outside, which is what you just demonstrated. And then there's Carlos mentions mswjs.io. I believe this is a snapshot testing framework. If my memory doesn't.
I don't know that one.
Yes, it's API mocking for JavaScript. This is the snapshot testing framework. So also what you would consider to be a zero architecture, where you basically snapshot test your real request and then you create mocks based on them.
In my work, I make a dependency injection using context API.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I would go with these two, Adrian, and I see that some people responded actually with dependency injection as well. This is way better approach because this won't make a test fail if we replace the technical details.
It'll make it structure independent, implementation independent.
Here, again, to recap, we have a tie coupling here. We are using Visa SDK inside this adapter here, okay? And this adapter is used inside our use case functional layer. So there is a tight coupling here. How can we make it loose coupling here? Okay, and this is possible with dependency inversion. Let me show you the diagram from my super slides, 𝗂𝗱𝗶𝗃𝗲 slides. So the dependency inversion, that's the last principle from Solid, actually, assumes that there are no coupling between the outside world, in our case, between Visa SDK and the React code. In that case, our use case functional layer, okay? But rather both rely on some intermediate interface, this one and this one, plus implementation details within the adapter shall also rely on the interface, okay? This is like how I nail down the dependency inversion. So
the interface needs to capture things like asynchronicity, progress, error states, the exception it may throw, but not into fine detail.
So somehow we need to, in React terminology, somehow we need to remove the import that this layer has. Explicitly, I'm pointing out to this import.
We need to move it from a compile time coupling to something that we can control.
Yeah, somehow we need to remove this,
time.
And then it will be low coupling. You know, for now it is tight coupling. And how to do this? Okay. First, what we will do is we go to the test. Here, and the test we will wrap with some context. I have context provider in place. That's a type safe implementation of React context. Nothing more than React context. It's just type safe. So in TypeScript you get these hints when you are using this. So this thing requires some providers, this is exactly where we'll put a fake implementation inside. But in production code, if we go to our routes where the page is used, we will plug in a production implementation. So I'm wrapping this into places.
You gotta import it, yeah.
We just need to put here somewhere something, okay? And to put here something, we need to declare actually this interface, what it will be. Okay. And so where is my provider? Here is my provider. For speed up, I will copy it. We go here and create a new file, which we will call, for example, a virtual card provider TS. And here I will copy this. And let's say we can even don't use these, but create here another type. And this type will be similar to what Visa provided us. It was called credit card from here. So let's copy actually this one.
Rafik, I can see your comments. It's not our focus right now, but we will attend to it in the end if we have some time.
Yeah. This is my interface that I defined like in a diagram. And here I describe an interface of my adapter, actually the one that we designed using unit test. That was a factory function that returns another function that at the end returns me a promise. This is exactly what we designed with the unit as an adapter. Here is some magic that my type safe context wrapper provides. I use it by passing here some factory in, and I create a hook here, which is taking some value that we will put with a plug into the context. It will take it from the React context API. Okay. Now let's use this in the test. And here we need a fake. Okay. And fake will look like, let me see, the fake could look like something like this.
Beautiful. So it's similar to our mock, but we're now not mocking it on the Axios level. We are mocking it on the glue level in our what you would consider our event bus or our sort of orchestration for the actual render and the data Redux flow or whatever analogy you would use for the architecture, the data architecture. Nik, any ETA? How much time you have left coding, just to set some expectations for our audience?
I think not more than 10 minutes because we are almost done.
Okay, thank you.
I just put I just have to plug in the production implementation.
Perfect.
So let's see.
This is a very great presentation so far.
Yeah. So look at this. Look what I did here. I created some provide virtual card that is an interface, and it accepts my adapter. So it's a function that returns another function that returns finally a promise with my fake. And here we will put Denis, like in our test. Okay. Sorry, Denis.
Thank you.
And here we have this 1, 2, 3 hard coding in place. Okay. This is now we see that it's going in here. Okay. All good. Now let's do the same thing, but we plug a real implementation into the production code. So we go into our routes here, and here we do similar stuff, but instead of a fake, there was provide virtual card. Instead of a fake, we take our
The SDK.
adapter, the one that is coupled to the SDK, this one. And we pass it in.
So the provide virtual card is our wrapper that is context friendly, that does the presentation, that does the mapping, and it receives something that can fetch the card, and that is the adapter, just for the terminology. We have a lot of virtual card something on the screen. I just wanted to make sure we got the detail right.
What we did actually, what is important, what we did is we introduce this interface and we make sure that the adapter is completely decoupled from the rest of the application. We imported it very high of our application here in routes, for example, and plug it into our context. Now, last step here to do is to employ the retrieval of this data. So we go to our use case functional layer. Here it's still coupled to our adapter. The goal is to remove this dependency because this dependency is coupled to Visa. We don't want this. So we use our hook. That hook that we take from the interface. It doesn't have any implementation here, not at all. It's just some
static
interface.
Essentially.
So we take that, and this returns as a factory here, similar like it returns here. And we can even rename this stuff like this, drop this, and drop this, I guess.
Beautiful.
Now, where is the problem?
It wasn't permissified on that end, on the context side.
Let me check. Let me check on my side where we are missing something.
It is possible that the 08 is the problem, not the actual.
No. That's different stuff. So this is a factory that we get. But the factory gives us an adapter. And now the adapter, actually, we can name like this.
Please. Yes, makes sense.
And now the TypeScript is satisfied. Okay. So this means that we are relying on some context-stored implementation here, but we don't know the technical detail of the implementation. We just follow the contract of that interface. But what will be plugged in from the top, this layer doesn't know, and any other layer doesn't know. That's dependency inversion.
And it's unintuitive, because if we hadn't done this, then our domain layer, which is our part which fetches the card, would have to know that for React's purposes, we would need some kind of hook, some kind of effect in order to have bidirectional communication. And that is then the problem area where our domain layer would be pointing the wrong direction on its dependency graph towards React, towards the glue, which we don't want.
Now we rerun the test. We don't go outside anymore. Cypress doesn't fail that we neither record any API requests that Visa SDK is doing. The test always passes because we stopped actually the stuff inside. So we are good. We completed the outer circle of our outside-in test-driven development. And back to the test, just to understand that. Instead of mocking the inner implementation that I put before that here, something like jest.mock, vtest.mock, or Cypress has its own method that I shown.
Which captures the network layer.
We instead invert the dependency of the code that communicates with an outside world. And actually, therefore, I initially guided us to create that adapter separately. I guided us to create it in isolation, even it looked like an over-engineering at the beginning. What for? I'm abstracting one line of code, away into another functional layer. But now it shall make sense. Now we got things in place. So we completed our outer circle here completely by writing some unit tests, by writing these acceptance tests up front, and now we are good. And all our tests are decoupled from implementation details. This means you could do aggressive refactoring of anything. You could move components around, change divs to some other design system as you want. You could do change how your model is generated, the view model. We could go to this service if necessary and abstract these functions like retrieve me a year, retrieve me a number into separate functions if we want. We could do so many things, but test will continue to pass until the behavior didn't change. These are the resilient tests. Okay.
They're not tied to implementation details. They're not tied to any of our lower level interfaces or integration points. They're not tied to structure or any kind of implementation that will be implicit to how React functions.
Yeah. So last thing that I wanted to show before I'm done, that's the testing strategies that we employ here. And we are using this pyramid. On a low level, for business logic, we are using unit tests with vtest or jest, whatever you prefer best. The point is that unit, in my understanding, is a code that is not related to React, not related to any framework. It's a pure JavaScript code. Maybe it uses some Lodash, maybe whatever operational library
infrastructure,
you can use,
no integration points.
But it doesn't know about the framework at all, because when you have such an isolation, such a separation of concert for this, it's easy to reason about this code. It's easy to port it to the backend if at some point you will want that the backend does this business logic for you. Easy, It's easy to change this code because you are not bundled to any GSX code, or like Adrian said, when everything is just in one component. This is a unit, and we test this unit with respectful tooling. The next is like when we test some journeys, then we can employ different tools here: Playwright, Cypress Components Test, or RTL, React Testing Library. This is what we demoed today. And if you can spin up your backend for test, if you can afford that really, then you could do the end-to-end test for just critical user journey. So you have just a few end-to-end tests because they are the slowest, we have to be
and the most flaky ones, so they can fail here and there. API is not available, backend has some problems, and you don't get a real feedback if it's really working or not. Right?
Yeah, true.
They're not processed. They're not intra-processed. They're not independent. When they fail, you will question whether they failed for the right reason, and then you will just waste a lot of time debugging it.
And of course, manual test is important to do. Okay, so to run a manual test, I will stop my Cypress and run a quick manual test. It started my app. My app is in place. The virtual card is here. I create a card and I see it loads. I see something. I create another card. I wait again. Seems SDK needs some time to create that card. Maybe we could. That could be a next iteration for sure. But manual test is passing and so forth.
It works. It is already delightful to the user.
Yeah. So I want to ask myself, like for you people here, a question. But what to do with API interaction? We today demonstrated an SDK usage, and for SDK usage, it makes total sense to invert the dependency, make sure that your code is not coupled with a
so there's code,
SDK and so on.
There's interface.
But if you call your APIs, does it make sense to mock or no? By mocking, I mean, in Cypress, it would be something like this: ci.intercept
You intercept the axios call or the
get
fetch call.
and get, and there will be, let's say we get cards, and there we could return some body that will bring us cards, and there will be a list of cards given. This configures Cypress that whenever an API request to this method is done, then this tab will be returned. So we won't go to the real API, but rather this tab will replace the real API. This tightly couples the test with the implementation detail, because the call to the API is implementation detail. If your production code changes the endpoint, for example, to this one, then the test will fail. Even the behavior didn't, okay? But I think it would be over-engineering if we would not mock but dependency invert all the API requests we are making to API for our app. So I think it's very valid to actually do this for your own APIs. And this is more pragmatic approach, I think, using with testing, but only for APIs. For SDKs, don't do this mocking that I showed. Don't mock inner implementation detail. Don't
because
don't share the knowledge.
It implies knowledge about how the SDK works, what the SDK integrates with. You run it once, so you're doing some kind of snapshot testing manually through your brain. You filtered out bits you think are important, and then the SDK changes, and all of that has to be reevaluated by a human, and that you don't want. It's okay to mock stuff. It's okay to intercept network requests when the target is something that you own, your company, your team, when you own it. Because otherwise you'll just do double work. You just do double coding. You have the backend version and the fake front-end version, which is the same. But however, I have been on teams where the front-end team asked the backend team to say, when you're in a Next.js app, for example, or when you're using GraphQL, when they just tell them, hey, if you give us an SDK that's generated from the backend API, we would gladly use it, and then we would do it as if it were an external SDK. I've seen that kind of communication where teams just have a gentleman's agreement between each other to say, okay, look, the main critical APIs, please give me an SDK, and I will treat the SDK like a third-party system. But that's not universal.
And I think Paul, some time ago, some of my connections on LinkedIn told, like, if you actually change on backend your endpoint to a new endpoint, or if you change some interface here from that, it's actually a breaking change, and it actually makes sense that your test fails in that case. Even behavior doesn't change, because it at least signals you actually, we change that, please reflect it in the test. That's fine.
Something should fail.
Yeah, so I agree with this.
If the team can act on failure immediately before it goes out to production, it should fail.
Yeah. So I think it's more pragmatic rather than doing dependency inversion for all your own API endpoints.
Again, those that you own. If you're in Google and you don't, Google has 200,000 engineers. You don't own the 199,000 engineers' product that you don't even know exist, right? So these rules depend on the size of the company, the size of the teams, the co-location of the company. Maybe you have a team in Latin America and a team in Germany, and they don't get along and they only meet once a month. Absolutely, mock it, intercept it, or treat it like an SDK, and then agree. Like, well, how should the teams collaborate?
Yeah.
Don't assume that there is a default answer that Nik likes that now you have to adopt universally across all of your projects. There is context to these decisions.
There is there can be like architectural decisions as well. So if you create a very complex app, so a real client, right? It's a different thing than creating a landing page. So there are two different worlds there. If you have many data you need to aggregate later on your client, it does make sense to collect data, aggregate data, and reuse it in your client and not directly intercept it in a test, because then your test becomes very large, let's say, because you need to basically do the aggregations there as well. So as soon as you have that kind of patterns, you need to have more abstraction layers, which points for me towards the idea of context again, to have some overarching context which handles that. Otherwise, you will get problems with complexity in testing. This is what I mentioned, what I experienced quite a lot in the past.
Yeah.
Nick,
If I may, I'm done.
I was just about to ask you to do this. Yes.
just wanted to say that I'm doing like mostly programming payment systems, and I enjoy it very much. But I see that there is a big demand of software craftsmanship, raising the bar, and so on. Therefore, I built these two offers. One is the team workshop. If you have a team that has some enterprise setup already, it doesn't mean that you are Google or so. You just have a product that already validated product market fit, and you have to move forward. Then this workshop is for you. It's in regards to building test-driven development habit in your team, crafting React applications. And the second, many people after this workshop reach out to me and want to follow up with some mentorships. Or recently I opened a one-on-one mentorship program, and you could bypass the workshop if your team or company isn't ready yet for that, and just reach out to me and we arrange some mentorship. It costs, but people say it's worth it. And I'm trying to share as much as possible the knowledge and help you out to figure out test-driven development with React, clean architecture with React, master testing, or whatever problems you want we encounter together.
How would you prefer people reached out to you, Nick?
LinkedIn is the best communication channel. You could message me, or there is a service block on my profile on LinkedIn that allows you to send me a request for mentorship, for example, or any other way. Write a comment and I will reach out in any of my posts. And so let's do it through LinkedIn. That's my main channel, and I'm every day there. I publish some educational materials, so I will see it and we will connect and do some work together.
Beautiful. So Nick and I do similar stuff. So if you're looking for this thing, but on the back end, I do team coaching and one-on-one mentoring in exactly the same format as Nick mentioned. LinkedIn is the best format to reach me, or my Mentor Cruise profile for one-on-one. Adrian, you're more strategic. How are people best to connect with you? You had a lot of comments regarding the business decisions, the strategy, which technologies we use. You were immediately, what's the tech stack? What's the pipeline? You have a very much sort of top-down perspective from the business side.
Well, I help the companies who not took people like you and Nick and tried by themselves without following those practices, and then somehow save them by telling the CTOs, the CEOs what went wrong and why we should change it right now. And it will take some time and what we need to do. So basically, we help companies to get things right long term. Why do you need those things? On a strategic layer, tactical layer, and of course on the operational layer as well. But this is not our main business actually. So we're helping actually to navigate the entire journey. So for example, I saw there was this question here. Hey Nick, for companies that ship fast, how can they adapt TDD? So you adapt TDD to ship fast. It is one of the foundational basics of continuous delivery, and continuous delivery is about shipping fast. Yeah, if you don't test and ship fast, you ship broken code. You don't ship code. You ship, right? And this is what you do then.
If you ship fast and you don't do TDD, you're not shipping fast enough.
The biggest problem in the last 5 years I saw, I have about 30 years of experience in that area. we have in the last 5 years, we have this startup thinking. And this is a big problem. People think or don't leave the design at, let's say, the prototype phase. They just think that, oh, you need to get to market fast because my stakeholders, my business stakeholders, investors tell me to do that. But suddenly you are in a production level with your own prototype. And this is basically the problem where so many companies fail, even if they have a market fit, because they simply cannot afford the own technology anymore. And this is where we actually help. Right.
As a life coach, I can tell you that this makes perfect sense, right? Because it is the right decision for the code design if you expect the business to fail. It is the right decision to ship fast and to shit code if you expect the business to fail and you just wanna limit your sunk cost essentially.
And
the problem is you create a problem only if the business is successful, which is exactly the opposite that you want, right? If it's a gamble, you want the positive to be big and the negative to be small. But if you're successful by shipping untested code very quickly, and even if you say, oh, I will write tests later, if it turns out to be successful, that's also a fool's errand, because now you just made all of the tests that you didn't write very expensive to write. And now the moment you can have market feedback and you can adapt features for the markets, for the user feedback that's coming in from the fintech company of, oh, we want this and we want that, the engineers say, oh no, we now need to feature freeze for 6 months because all the tests, the technical debt that we accrued, and now we need to stop, and now we need to rewrite everything. The business is like, are you guys crazy? No, like, let's repeat this, what we just did. And that doesn't work out. That never works out. I'm sorry.
We were today with Camilla, who were in the audience but not with us. We had that today. We pair programmed today in exactly this. There was a function which was untested, about 1 hour of initial development, and the debugging of what was the problem, where's the problem, and how can we extend it was taking 2 hours later instead of just 5 minutes. And this is the point. It is always the very same thing. And Daniel Moka was having this quote. I'll quote him now. He said on LinkedIn 2 weeks ago, something like that. So when you say you don't have time to test, how can you have the time to basically build it twice? And this is what you should take from this. This is the point about that. So not testing means you can't build quality code by that. It is simply impossible.
Also, testing is a practice.
Yeah.
Right. So you also need to integrate. Right. So you can say I know how to test, but you just know about testing. You have never displayed evidence of being able to ship tested production code. So if your team keeps saying we know how to test, but we never do write tests, we never do TDD, then you've never displayed evidence of being able to do TDD quickly, which is why it is a practiced discipline, not a thought about discipline, which is why we continuously say, small steps, get down to the cadence that Nik displayed today. Nik created an integration test, 2-3 unit tests, refactor the application in under 2 hours, right? So your feature can be done in this way so that you can do 2 or 3 cycles like Nik just displayed in a single business day. Stripe the CTO of Stripe just today posted a platform engineering video, a short on LinkedIn, saying they deploy 1,000 times every day.
Yeah.
Because that's how many commits they make. Every commit is test covered, and they deploy every commit. I mean, they release every commit in like a canary release, where then then they do the rolling release when both versions are in production, and they slowly roll over traffic. But that's what you can achieve. The person who asked us, what do you do if you ship fast, and you already are shipping fast, and you want to adopt TDD, you're not shipping fast enough, right? So you're not at the ceiling yet. You can go much faster. And it's possible you're
more confident while you're being fast.
More confident, exactly. It might be that you're shipping fast, but you're not confident it works. Or you might be shipping fast, but only 10% of what you shipped.
And I want to quickly say something, because I'm business owner, entrepreneur myself, so I'm on both worlds, on the business side and the engineering side. shipping fast for the investors doesn't mean that you shall ship as fast as the first somehow iteration is there. It means that you ship fast a reliable version which meets the criteria of your users who are willing to pay for this, which means the stuff must function, it shall not break, and it shall satisfy people. It is not like you ship anything in just ship something. It is not about that. It is to ship what is necessary, and it's your job as an engineering person to decide when or what actually fast is. Fast means that you ship it and then you don't need to rework what you've already shipped. It is about you have shipped it, it is done, next iteration. Yeah. Otherwise, you will end up like most other companies creating their first legacy system after 12 months while they are not yet on market. And this is then the problem, because then you start to fix problems before you actually be able to create new features, which actually create the value. And this is what the investors want to have. They want to have working features they can sell and not bury the company because you have shipped too fast.
Mm-hmm. If I may also add, like you guys nailed the concepts really good. I wanted to just to say that the initial learning leap should be taken. So it's not like one day that you didn't do TDD and tomorrow you do TDD after watching this live coding that I did in public today. It takes time, and my suggestion, practical suggestion, is the simplest way to start is whenever you see a business logic, data transformation, that data retrieval from some API stuff, data mapping you need, if conditions, try to first design it with a unit test. Yeah. This is the simplest one you could do in React. Whenever you see some data management needed, abstract away, create a small test, you know the input, document the output, implement a trivial function that do mapping, data retrieval, if conditional returns in there. Make it in baby steps so your unit test pass, and then integrate that function in the rest of your React application. This is the simplest way how to start building the habit. Don't overcomplicate it with dependency inversion at the beginning. No, just go low-level unit testing, and you will build a habit within time.
Mm-hmm. You will see that the only thing you will need to invert are third-party APIs or time-based APIs or flaky APIs like a random generator or OAT card that are on the critical user journey. All of those little things that are not on the critical user journey, you probably won't care about inverting, or at least you'll inject it or mock it in a more stale way, or you have a backend proxy handling it for you. It's a very popular choice as well, where handling time or handling lock synchronization is handled by an in-house bus or in-house service on the backend side. Authentication. Maybe you have a federated GraphQL that up until a certain point has sticky sessions for the correct shard, so that a certain user always goes to a certain server inside a given context. It's possible that is solved on a much higher architectural layer. So rather create small pieces that you can put together. If you made a mistake and you made them too small, then it's easy to put them back together into a bigger file and just delete 10 files and merge them into one. But it's really hard to take a large file that is used in different ways in 3 different places and split that apart. That's the hard bit, and that's rework, and that's unnecessary rework. Because taking small pieces and putting them together, that's just refactoring. Taking a large thing and figuring out how to split it apart, that's actual hard work, right? So you would rather have a 5 minutes of easy refactoring than 1 hour of rework. 1 hour of rework is what you get.
There is even another aspect to it. So how the motivation for you to work on code? So is it nice to work on your code, or is it basically an ugly thing? Is it something where you build up resistance in your team to even touch code? And this is what Nik was pointing at. So many great things today regarding React and how you actually create functions outside of React and use React with all the layer ideas because if you don't do that, then React becomes hell for you, because then you are in some kind of re-rendering hell and you don't know what's going on. You can't split things apart. And this is why so many people think that React isn't a great thing. React is a very great, it is my favorite, let's say, way to work with frontends these days, if you use it right. If you use it wrong, it's bad. And this is one of the worst things. React is not a beginner framework. React is a advanced pattern to use. So in order to use React right, you need to understand programming principles. This is actually Nik is using those things. I don't know exactly how they work, but you can do this.
I think he has a virtual camera through the.
No. This is in the Mac. You can do that, but I don't know exactly.
Come on, guys.
No, it does work, and it does work. A client showed me that, but I can't get it done again.
Hang on.
No,
so we have a lot of questions left here. Do we want to address a few? Oh,
I'm
yes.
happy to stay
Nik,
for a while if you are still online.
everybody's asking if they could have an export of your 𝗂𝗱𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃, if that's available in any shape or form that they could consume on their own device.
Let me now publish in comments somewhere.
Okay, that has been very much a common ask throughout the entire episode. I would like to mention that today was our busiest episode. You might not see it behind the scenes, but we had the equivalent of a small conference today. Almost 400 people showed up for the live stream today.
That is not a small conference. That is small conferences are way smaller than that. Yeah.
So this has been our biggest stream so far. I'm glad we had no technical issues. So StreamYard, thank you. This has been a great PWA. Yeah. And we had amazing audience participation. So I would like to do a bullet round, if you may. Nik, any questions that you want to address from our start section? Some of them are technical, some of them are challenging your design. Which one do you think would be valuable to address?
35.
A lot of them overlap. I've already filtered through a lot.
Oh, sorry.
So one question is it from Andrea, is it wrong to put the creation of the model in the adapter? Well, it's not wrong. In React, you are so flexible that everything is right. You could do whatever you want, but the point is here is the separation of concerns, that adapter is a code that communicates with an outside world, and you want to change it along with some other stuff that is related just for that. And service layer is something that you prepare for your application code, you know, that's not related to outside world much.
This is amazing because we can see Andrea's aha moment, because Andrea said, is it wrong to put the creation of the model in the adapter? And then I would put even the method from vis_pass as a parameter, because I have the feeling that the adapter was created just for testing purposes. It's the legit feel. And then a few people agreed with Andrea. And then the aha moment a few minutes later. With context provided, makes sense. Right, so we went through the whole dramatic curve.
One case where transformation of the data that comes from the outside world, from API or SDK, or makes sense to be allocated in the adapter. Adapter is a boundary of our code base, you know, is when the output of that outside world is ugly, and you want to protect your other part of the code base, actually every code base, on the border of that. So you transform it to more comfortable objects, and then this object will be used all over a place rather than original API object, for example. Then you do transformation very early on the boundary here in the adapter, making sure that all the rest of the code doesn't know about this ugly API data, but it knows about this eco-friendly great object that fits everything.
I would like to answer Edwin's question, Edwin Vargas. What is the reason to create a factory? It might not be obvious because, we're in a world where our test turned out well, but we did something very important, and Nik highlighted this in a few moments. I would suggest that you go back, watch the recording, and check where Nik said we're moving this import and changing it into a call time dependency. We're removing the import and we're moving the location where the coupling happens. Right? So what we're doing with a factory is we were moving from what you would consider a traditional inheritance-based coupling, where we have a JSX tree and there's coupling implicitly with how the files are imported. So the coupling is compile time, and we go from that to a compositional type of coupling, where the coupling happens at runtime or at render time or at routing time, or in the case of our test, at mount time. Because at mount time we decide, oh, you know what, I want to put something else here. When I'm mounting it, when I'm using it in a specific purpose that only makes sense, that is only necessary to be mounted, right? So we are creating a factory to change it from a creational coupling to a usage coupling, to a composition type of coupling, right? This is, you might have heard this as separation of concerns, inheritance versus composition. That's what we did. But we used a simple factory pattern, but the benefit was much larger compared to how simple it was to implement. But it was not accidental, and it wasn't, it wasn't an easy thing to do. It was very hard to name it correctly and to put it in the correct place. But this Nik did implicitly because he has a lot of experience with his architecture that he's set up. And thank you, Nik, for showing that example. That is a very, very good example of compositional architecture rather than inheritance-based architecture.
Yeah, I wanted to show something that is not API, because API is so popular usage, but SDK is less popular.
Yeah, in-house APIs are, people cut shortcuts on in-house APIs because they might control both ends.
Henrico proposed to use high-order component.
HOCs.
Stuff.
We can also create a higher order component. I call it something like inject some service and use it to make it cleaner. It usually looks like prop drilling for me because we end up having a double layer to the component. What's your take on this? You have more experience with it.
It's possible to use this, absolutely. So you will do the injection through the high order component and wrap one higher order component in test code, which will have some fake output, and the real production one that's coupled with SDK, in that case, in production code. So it's possible. I just feel that with what I show using hooks is just more straightforward.
Yeah, so use context has the benefit of traversing the tree for you. Whereas if you use the higher order component, you would still have to pass the prop manually. So there's that element of, if
you can pass the prop via something like recoil or Redux.
Oh, so that you could auto.
So you can decouple that.
Yes, you could auto box it. But then why wouldn't you use Redux or Remix instead? If you're already doing that, right? To auto-generate the code that's being sort of recoiled around.
Because you are on some point, if you use something like, for example, recoil, which is just the client-side state management, then you need to have some place where you handle the data coming from outside. So in Redux, you had Redux Thunk. You have 10-stack query these days to handle that.
It's more business oriented, so like Zustand, where you have a state machine that knows
exactly.
About the
recoil is like Zustand. It's basically some kind of sibling.
I wasn't familiar with it.
Yeah, but this is then a more complex topic. It depends on how complex your architecture is. So do you have just a bit of data, or do you have data which you need to, before you actually use it, you need to aggregate it, for example, or you need to filter it or something like that, and this does make a difference then.
Thomas asked, can you say a few more words about why you built a model function? Like, what is the difference to the view? My first thought would be that, for example, with the spaces between the card number and be the job of the view, so the formatting, the mapping, the presentation layer. Why have you decided to build a model function? I see a lot of React components do this inline inside the components, and then it's not clear what's coupled with what. Especially in the old class-based React, when you had the onMount and the onMount, and then you had the presentation layer somewhere mixed in.
I
thought it was
built
messy.
this view model factory function that created for me an output that my view demands, because in reality, this is an assertion of different states of the view possible. You know, it could be, let's say, with the virtual card like we had, just mostly one logical branch that you are remapping, but it could be even contain more, like Visa card, maybe another type of card, MasterCard. Maybe there needs to be some data that could trigger another use case, even, for example, whether to show pin change or not pin change, whether to have a CVC code hidden and there is a button to enable it when you only click it, you know. And those
Or you might go from one card to two, and then one of them is a Visa and one of them is a MasterCard,
Exactly.
and then, so they would have different
So your
adapters.
view model will expand with different states of its own, you know. In one state it outputs this kind of shape, in another one another, and so forth. And when it's abstracted away and tested using this unit test like that, then it's just easy to track different software behavior. For just Visa card, we have this snapshot of the output and input. For MasterCard, we have another one. For a feature that shows a CVC code, we have another one snapshot. And so many snapshots we could have, like in the form of unit tests, representing there just in one place.
Okay, I have a comment. In the end, everything made sense. Thank you for your thoughts and experience, Nick. Another happy user from LinkedIn. Hey, Nick, companies that ship fast. Okay, this is TDD. Sorry, this one we already answered. We had another follow-up question from Sabrina. How did you make this decision? What are the parameters used to make the decision about mocking data, module, promise? What is the approach in order to ensure code quality? Do you have like a go-to approach?
In general, I try to do not mock any inner implementation detail whenever is possible, and in 99% is possible. So this is because whenever you actually couple your code with the outside world, then testing becomes hard. Or testing hooks becomes hard. You know, how use effect behaves. Will you mock it along with React? You know, the point is that I think many people don't write tests for React application is because the code that is produced is designed in such a way that it's very hard to test it. How to come up with a test. So therefore, my decision is to avoid mocking whenever possible. Just fake with dependency inversion.
There's nothing worse than being first to market, and then the longer you're on market, because your code is not test covered, the longer you're on the market, the lower your team's confidence gets. And there is nothing worse than a software team that has a profitable product that is not confident to deploy, that is anxious every time they have to deploy something. That's how you ruin businesses. So it's good once to get to market really fast. But if you haven't taken it seriously up until then, it's likely you never will, which means that whatever you now produce from that point onward will just will be more likely to fail than not. And that's sad. And that sadly, most organizations work that way because they don't have long-term vision, right? So if you need long-term vision, this is the guy. This is the guy. And if you're already stuck on that route and you want to change it, you can talk to me, because it might just be resistance, and I like helping people crush resistance. We have another question regarding end-to-end tests. What do you think about replacing assertions that check whether certain text or visual elements appear on the page in the Cypress test with a single screenshot test? So I believe this was in contrast to 5:40 p.m. This was in contrast to the data labels that we added for selection purposes. Do you think it would make the test better if we even removed those and relied on a screenshot? Is a screenshot a better medium than data labels?
No, definitely not. Whether it's a snapshot of your DOM structure, whether it's a screenshot of your page, imagine that the pixel moves around, the color changes, and your test will break. But for a customer, it's not nothing changed. The customer can complete the work like it was, all the journeys are working, just the color change because your design system team decided to slightly change it or move stuff around. You know, you don't want your test that assert your business, the journeys, to fail in that case. Therefore, any snapshotting is making waste of your team's time because you will be who will maintain it. You will see the failing test, you will regenerate the snapshot, you will spend a few minutes on that. Today 1 minute, tomorrow 2 minutes, in a year it's 10 hours, and a team of 20 people produces how many hours waste?
Then you have 200 snapshot tests, and one designer comes to the idea you need to have more animations on your page, right?
Yep.
And then you have every test is failing because and flaky failing because the animation state is every time differently captured. Don't do that. And those snapshot tests are. I don't need them actually.
So on the test desiderata, if you go to the test desiderata page, if you Google it, this is called structure dependence. So how structure insensitive the tests are, but also how writable the tests are. You know, if you add a lot of detail to your test, a screenshot has a lot of detail, then it will make your tests more expensive to write because you will need to add all the detail. And when you change your design, you'll need to if the detail of the design changes, you'll need to find all of the mocks and the fixtures that you've created for tests and now adapt them to the new detail, even if the behavior still works, right? So your tests will become less predictive because you won't trust them for confidence on whether production will work, because you won't trust them because of a single pixel change. And that's the worst thing. If you start neglecting that, you will create a team that doesn't trust their tests, and there's nothing worse than that. Because such a team is slow. Such a team is not capable of serving the business really quickly. You have some weird Apple decision to change something in the fintech industry, you might have to adapt in 2 days. In those 2 days for emergency deploys, you want your test to be robust and you want to move fast. If you don't have that and you think you're moving much faster by not having tests, you're in la la land. I'm sorry. There are a few more design specific questions. Should we close it here? Do you want to address it in some write-up later on? We had a few risk management questions, which are sort of follow up now on the discussion. I think the idea is to minimize risk costs for the investors. It's true that the one startup that succeeds will have to face rewrite code freeze later, but for investors, it's probably cheaper for those 6 months of hard work and to give each startup they invest into 2 extra months to run the architect and test things properly, knowing most of them will fail. Actually, that's a response to something I said. So my point is, there is no rewrite code freeze later. That never happens, right? So the only outcome for such a business is failure. They have to live with what they created, which means that there is a hard to change monolith application that will drive developer satisfaction and developer happiness down. And then whatever next generation of engineers will come into that kind of company will want to go around whatever exists already in the company. And that will come at a huge cost to the company. This is normal. This is normal behavior. People isolate themselves from the code base that they don't like working in. And usually it happens to be that the most profitable part of the code base, the legacy part of the code base, is the one that people don't like working in. So you want to merge that as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, but as high as a standard as you can, as early as possible. There is no, I will be messy, and then on June 7th, I will start becoming not messy. Because you're a product of your environment. If you've created a messy code base with a team that creates a messy code base, with a team that has shown evidence of having messy habits, those messy habits will continue.
You can, if you stay with a prototype idea and keep it like a prototype. And then you start to build the real product if you have this luxury. But most people don't, and so they don't want to do a Figma file as an MVP. So they create a application as an MVP, and hey, we already created something, we can build up on that. And this is the no, don't do that. This is nonsense. Don't do that. You will suffer from that, and it is not worth it. And in the end, business people will make you as an engineer or software developer accountable for this in some way or another, or closes the company, fires your team, something like that. They will blame you. It is not them. And what engineers often do wrong is not saying no. If it's impossible to do something, there are so many startup owners who say, hey, do the impossible. Doing the impossible is impossible. Don't do that. No.
Technical debt is like being a credit card person. If you're a credit card person and you pay off your credit card fees and your credit card debt by taking on another credit card debt, well, guess what? At a certain point, somebody will say, okay, now the business is profitable. Please stop the credit card thing. Well, you just created a whole habit system where you depend for your life on credit cards. You rely on not writing tests in order to have your level of productivity. If you want to now write tests, you have to tell the business, oh yeah, but I was moving really fast. You thought that was normal. That was actually my maximum. From now on, if we're doing it properly, we're going down to this speed. And the business will then say, well, at this speed, we're not profitable. I wish we had known that sooner. That's how businesses usually react, is that you need to know what your actual speed is when you're writing tests, because you need to be challenging the business to not put unnecessary features into the pipeline. That's how the speed up happens. If you have 100 features in the backlog, maybe only one of them is valuable. You speed up 100%, like 2x, by not delivering the 99 that were unnecessary and delivering 2 of those valuable instead. That's how you get exponential speed up. Now, it's possible that you will have to touch maybe a little bit on each of those 99, or maybe half of them you'll have to touch to see, this is not it, not it, not it, not it, not it. These 5 might be the top valuable feature that we're looking for. That's how software engineering happens. And if you've never gone through this Russian roulette of just understanding that most of your requirements are wrong, most of your tickets are wrong, most of your roadmap is wrong, that's what you're testing against. You're writing tests to say, hey, is this actually valuable to the user? If I finish this, are we actually stopping everything to deploy, to give it to the user, to ask for feedback, to respond to the feedback? And then you repeat that cycle. If you lay off the amount of testing that you're doing in order to ship a large batch, you'll have too much feedback to act upon, and then you have to triage. Then you ignore some of it, which means that some of the things you've built were unnecessary. And that's just the reality. To test early, to push back on the business sooner. They will respect you more. Don't make them happy. Make them rich. Right? If you try to get your stakeholders' trust by making them happy, they will distrust you when they see that code quality had to suffer for it.
Mm-hmm.
But you only know that in hindsight, and that comes with experience.
Yeah, well, people who build houses don't build it faster because people want to get in earlier. They want to have a solid house in the next 50 years to have.
That's a good example. Yeah, build it fast, and then it starts leaking 6 months in, and you're like, "How did you build this?" Well, you wanted it fast. Right? But
this is not what your client and your business stakeholder really wants. They simply don't understand. They are used to that normal craftsmen out there doing manual work can predict how long it takes to fix a toilet or something like that. That's totally fine. That's actually production work, right? But we don't do production work. We are design workers. We're only doing design. Yeah. The only thing in production we do are CI/CD pipelines, like creating software and delivering it. This is production engineering. This is what ops people do. But developers are design engineers. So we are only in the designing phase. So we don't know how long it takes, but it must take the time to make it right in the first place. Otherwise, you will fail later on. This is technical debt by definition. You can have thousands of definitions, but this is the core definition of technical debt. It is postponing your problems into the future.
And you can do what Nik did. Nik said very clearly, it might be over-engineering. My intuition says it's correct in this case for these reasons. That's it. That's all you need to learn how to communicate.
Just wanted to add one thing, that TDD isn't slower, really isn't slower. It's slow at the beginning when you didn't adopt it, the mindset, when you are learning, obviously, but that's the same like sports. You are not so good at the beginning, but get better when it sticks. And the difference in speed is the following. Maybe I take a bit more time because I drive everything with the test, but after I ship, I get way more bugs than you have without writing tests. So instead of you fixing
You mean
the
you get
bugs,
less bugs?
spending time, I'm focusing on delivering next feature. You know, that's the difference in time.
That's
so
different.
that's a different
And not only
approach,
that,
but the
and that's a
timing is
solo.
the same.
And that's a solo approach. If you have tests, somebody else can do that as well. If you don't have any tests, then only the original author can fix those bugs, which is even worse. If you have a team of 10, then if each of those bugs has an owner, each bug has to be fixed by the correct owner. And there's nothing worse than that. Imagine there's a critical bug and that person has gone on vacation. If there's no tests in place, nobody other than that person, the original author, knows how to fix that bug. Even worse, that person gets hit by a bus, gets sick, leaves the company. You get a bug in there 6 months later, nobody knows how to fix it. The original author thought, oh, we can fix it later. It's going to take me a day. They leave the company, and now whoever picks it up is going to need a week. That's where the slowdown happens, right? So we're looking at it on a long time scale. A long time scale of a successful business. If your business is not around, I'm sorry, you're optimizing for the wrong thing. My kids are going to bed, so I would like to do a hard stop here.
I need to as well.
Nick, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.
This was great. I was super excited about this one. I will go over all of the comments. Now add them to the recap. And if there's any that you might want to address, I will DM you personally, and maybe you have a little bit of a back and forth on Substack or on LinkedIn to honor all of the questions we haven't been able to go through. We have more than 400 people joining us live today. Thank you so much. Nick, any last words? Here's your banner.
I just want to take break. Won't reply today, sorry. Tomorrow I will be happy to talk about anything you provide.
Awesome. This is Nick's link, my link, Adrian's link. Actually, Adrian has an overlay because he's high tech. This is Adrian's overlay.
But you need to remove the overlay of the overlay.
Oh, I didn't know that worked that way. Awesome. Adrian, do you mind doing an outro? And I would like to jump off.
An outro. Okay. So I don't know what you mean with outro, but I can quickly announce that we have next Wednesday CET why we use TypeScript and not JavaScript. And that's actually an important thing because I read way too many messages where people say, you just use JavaScript, that's a great idea. No, it's not. And we will tell you why next week on Wednesday, because we are businesses, we are professionals and not private people doing private stuff.
On Thursday, we have a business-oriented TDD. So the week of TDD, we'll be focusing on the business benefits of TDD. A lot of things that actually Nick touched on, right? So where does the speed up happen? How to communicate about this with the business? How to communicate about this with the manager? With the team that might not respect high standard craft or discipline. Okay, elevator music. Nick, thank you so much.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for
Thanks,
now.
Nick. Thanks, everyone.
This was great. Thank you. And we'll see you on Wednesday. Cue you some lovely elevator music and see you next time.
Already doing that.
Ciao.
Kinds of one thing. Number one, there's the engineering feedback, right?
Okay.
I'm going to deliver this change today to find out if it breaks it. And then there's the business feedback. I'm going to deliver the smallest slice of this next feature to find out if it's valuable and deliver that and get feedback. But
figure out if it's safe to merge and whether it's safe to continue with these requirements.
Yeah.
That's all.
Just because it passes all the tests doesn't mean that it doesn't break something in production once it finally gets to a production environment. I try to have a high level of confidence, but we're never 100% sure.
Yeah.
And so we want to get feedback as rapidly as possible on the engineering thing. People tell me there's no value in delivering anything until it's feature complete. No. I know it's stable. I want to make sure we're on the right track. I don't want to invest too much money in this idea. I don't want to assume my idea is correct. I want to assume my idea is incorrect. It's a scientific experiment. I'm trying to invalidate the hypothesis. And we should be ecstatic when it's successful and just accept when it's not. Mm-hmm. And then how do we change course to chase the value? instead of just assuming value.
I would like to add something to the term of confidence. I think confidence doesn't mean that you are 100%, as you said, 100% safe to deploy. It's about to be confident that you can handle a situation even if something happened, but you expect feedback. So what you definitely get is feedback. And if the feedback is a negative, you can react quickly on that. So this is confidence. It's not about, oh, I'm 100% sure that nothing will happen. I think this is a big misconception.
No, I agree. And people focus on the wrong thing. I want to make sure that everything is perfect before we deliver. That's the wrong thing.